Hi, I'm Zerfall, and welcome to the Q&A 1000 subscriber special. In the background, you're going to be looking at pictures from the World of Commodore 2015, various talks and things that I saw while I was around there, and hopefully you like the Diamond Iris effect because that's the only effect I've applied in this video. As far as the Q&A goes, I wrote down everything in this little handy dandy book, and including my answers so that I wouldn't be at a loss for words. However, my handwriting is atrocious, and sometimes even I have difficulty with it, so apologize if I stutter at all. First up, Old Dragon asked if I ever played Troll's Tale. Now this was probably meant to be more of just a inquisitive question on the video that he asked the questions on, but no, I haven't ever played it, but I did see a bunch of screenshots of it for the Apple II when I was looking for video games to play for download and whatnot, and the art style was a sort of big hit of nostalgia. It looked a lot like, you know, the different image editors there were back in the day. It looked a lot like the types of pictures we would draw as kids, and you can tell that the art wasn't drawn pixel by pixel, but somehow sort of drawn into the computer itself. It's very amusing looking. I haven't actually checked it out much further than that, though. His first official question is, of all the Sierra games you have played, what have you played the most? Now, I don't have official, hour logs for all of these games, but it's probably Space Quest 4. It's one of the ones I had back in the day. It was, I think, the Space Quest game definitely that I played the most. It was probably because we didn't have the hint book, but we constantly were trying different things in it to try to get it to work. So we probably played through that the most, and then once we did finally manage to beat the game, was after we got the hint book, but we had to go back and try to get a perfect score and whatnot. So it's probably the one, followed by Police Quest 2, for similar reasons. It's a game that we had, and earlier on, and we were trying to work through without any sort of hints at all. King's Quest 5 and 6 are probably the runners-up after that. We did have the VGA collection for King's Quest, so I had all those games like that, but 5 and 6 were probably my favorites back in the day. What is your favorite novel series / novella? Now, I'm probably going to mention this a few times, but I'm bad at picking favorites for things. So, realistically, I'm not going to say my favorite novel, but alternative history is probably one of my favorite subjects for novels. Authors like Kim Stanley Robinson, Harry Turtledove, and S.M. Sterling are some of my favorites. Earlier Harry Turtledove stuff, I like his World War series, but The Years of Rice and Salt, I believe, is a Kim Stanley Robinson novel that I really enjoyed. And the novels about the change, specifically the ones where Nantucket goes back in time, were pretty good books, and I enjoyed those all. Lastly, Ald asks, what do you do for a living, and what does it entail? The vast majority of what I do for a living involves graphic design work, whether making things from scratch or just getting things ready for being on the web. For other people. I haven't done a lot of the website design for our company in a while, but I still do almost all the actual making of the website. So taking the Photoshop files and turning them into websites, making things work using mainly CSS is the thing I like to do. I like to try to keep as much programming out of it as possible, and like Java and whatnot, and just try to make things work with CSS, which is fun for me, and it makes the website kind of load a little bit better if people don't have what they need. But apart from that, I'm also very much in charge of kind of keeping production flowing in the back room, which is why I have the title Production Manager. So, on next is Bobo. I'm doing these, by the way, in order of when they were received, as best I can tell. So we're on to Bobo, and he says, what consoles would you like to collect for that you don't have? Probably Neo Geo, or TurboGrafx / PC Engine. Those are systems that sort of captured the imagination a little bit when I was younger, but were always a little out of the price range for what to try, as well as, they've got some pretty classic games on them. Plus, the TurboGrafx can play PC Engine games pretty easily. Maybe the Dreamcast too. I don't have a Dreamcast. I had a friend with one as a kid. The Dreamcast is always a cool system. Unfortunately, it suffered from the fact that everyone could pirate games really easily, which is too bad. Question number 2. What games do you not have in your collection that you want the most? I would have to say it's probably early Final Fantasy games, Super Mario RPG. I recently got the original Zelda, so that's off the list. It used to be at the top of it, though. Earthbound, Chrono Trigger. I'm actually after Double Dragon 1 for the NES and Dragon Warriors 2 through 4. I think the Super Mario RPG is pretty obvious reasons why I'd like to own that game. So this kind of leads into the next question, which is, what's the crown jewel of your collection? I'm not really sure I have one, but the way I collect games is I collect games that I have very fond memories of. So, the original Final Fantasy is a game I bought one time while at the store with my dad. I'm happy to still have that. I don't have the box anymore, but I have almost everything else that came in the box. Wizards and Warriors, I remember one time we rented Wizards and Warriors 2 and played it a whole bunch at my nan's house when we were staying there for a weekend. So that's another game that I have really fond memories of. Games that I played with my brother a lot, which is probably why a lot of the early JRPGs are in my list of games that I want to get, because they are games that I played with my brother very often, or with friends. Like, I also have Pipe Dream on my list of games that I'm really happy to own, but Pipe Dream isn't really a rare game or anything like that. It's just a game I have good memories of, playing in Colorado with family, or playing with my mom later on in life. I actually did an LP of it. Bobo also asks, do you have anything you'd like to see me LP? And it's funny because I'd like to see him do more of the executive series from KOEI. But right now, the only English one available is Pulp Culture, the street fashion simulator for the DS, which I don't think is really up his alley, but they made a bunch of other games that never really ended up getting translated, which is unfortunate. There'll be more on that later, actually. I suppose I just like to see more quickie games like Card Battler Joe. Those are the sort of games that I like watching, so if you've got any more of those up your sleeves, get them out. So on to the next person. Stone Khan asks, what systems do you have? Now, this is a kind of a lengthy list, but not as lengthy as some people might have. I have an NES, an SNES, an N64, GameCube, a Wii. I have a Sega Genesis with the CD attachment. Don't have a 32X though. I have a C64, both the Breadbox version and the gray version. I also have an Amiga 2000, an Apple IIc, a Mac Classic, a PS2, Xbox 360, and of course a PC. 2 Game Boys, 2 Game Boy Colors, a GBA. It's the old school one with the screen in the center, but I have it modded so it still has a backlight. And I have a DS, and of course one can't forget the infamous Dream Gear. He also asks how many games. And this I'm not so sure about, and I can't count them right now because they're partially packed away getting ready for the move in January. So of the NES games, I probably have somewhere between 40 and 50 games. Game Boy, I have about 30-ish. That includes sort of all the different portable systems, not just the old gray Game Boy, the color and all that too. SNES, I only have about 12-ish. The Sega, I have like 42 of them. I know that because I checked my little spreadsheet. It's the only one I have a spreadsheet of, because I was given someone else's Sega collection, so that's why I've got so many of them. The GameCube, I only have 2 games for. As far as modern systems go, I have about 20-ish from PlayStation 2 onto Xbox 360. Part of the reason why I have so many NES games is actually I traded in a bunch of old Xbox and PlayStation 2 games that I knew I didn't really like for NES games at the local used games store. As far as the Amiga goes, I have like 4 games in box, which, if they're not in the box, they're sort of just pirated games, so that's the only real thing is worth mentioning. C64, I have 2 in-box games. One of them is still factory sealed, actually. And as far as really old PC games, I have like 2 of those in box. Kind of old PCS games, I've got like 20 games. And of course, tons and tons of modern PC games based off of Steam and whatnot. So quite the extensive collection for me. It's starting to take up a little bit too much room almost, so Jacksaurus kind of wants me to pare it down, or to, before I buy any more games, get rid of other games, so it's sort of a, revolving door of games and whatnot, but I don't know that that's going to happen. Don't tell her, though. Jolly Roger asks, Can you and one of your good LP buddies do a full playthrough of Druid for the C64? Now, I would actually love to do this. However, the sort of the net connection for playing multiplayer online with these old school games has been more miss than hit lately. So if I'm going to do this, I'll have to try to plan it for when my brother's in town, which is sort of what's unfortunate, is that none of my LP buddies really live near me, so it's hard to do an in-person thing, which that game kind of requires to do the two-player well. Mr. Funny Studio asks, what's your favorite C64 demo? I've said this before, and I know I'm going to say it again during this video, that I'm not very good at picking favorites for things. Part of that for this one is that I might have been a little too young during the early C64 demo scene to really get on board, and I don't understand the technical limitations of the C64 well enough to be really impressed by certain graphic demos. That being said, so what I'm going to talk about is more what I like in a demo that makes it a good one for me. So I really like the music. The music's got to be killer. If it's not going to do it for me. Kind of a good example that shows this off well is there's 26 kilograms by Triad is an example of one I'm not overly impressed with. And I'm sure that from a technical, graphical point of view, it's pretty impressive. However, the music choice in it is lacking, for lack of a better term, so I don't really like it. However, they did one called, this is Triad, Third Stone from the Sun, and even though it's 8 years older and less graphically impressive as far as the demos go, I suppose, the music is so much better that that's the one that I like. So that's kind of a thing for me there. I also really like it if the demo itself sort of tells the story. I don't have a good example of one offhand. However, I find it more interesting than just a plain graphics demo. The other thing that I like to see is if they do something fun with the sort of basic screen after you hit run. A good example of this is probably Deus Ex Machina by Crest and Oxygeron. They play with the boot screen, so what happens is after you hit run, the boot screen kind of it gets cut up and pulled away. If the screen melts, something like that. I like to see that something goes on with the boot screen. On to the next question. Undead Eggmaster asks, if I were a cookie, what type would I be? And I have two schools of thought on this. The first one is a hairball cookie. Not because I'm a hairy individual or I'm unpleasant to be with. However, as a cookie, if you get eaten, you stop existing. So I might want to be a disgusting cookie so that I'm left to go stale and exist for eternity as opposed to be consumed by someone quickly. But if we are going for the more what I'm like cookie, I would almost probably say a plain chocolate chip cookie freshly baked out of the oven because I like things old school and it's kind of what I'm like. Also, Jaxor makes some pretty killer chocolate chip cookies out of the oven, so they're kind of my favorite. Jet asks, what is my favorite game and why? And like I said recently, I'm not very good at favorites, but I'm going to go with Tetris. And the reason why I'm going to go with Tetris is because it's probably the game that I have the most amount of hours sunk into. It's a game that I've gone back to time and time again. It's specifically Tetris for the Game Boy. Played it tons on trips as a kid. We had a cottage that was a 4-hour drive away. Almost the full 4 hours could be spent on Tetris. In my teenage years, when most people would bring a book into the washroom with them, perhaps, I'd often bring in Tetris and play that while figuring things out. So it's a game that time and time again I go back and end up playing for hours. Not every week, not even every month, but every once in a while I'll just stumble across my Game Boy sitting wherever it is because I always leave it somewhere weird and go, oh man, let's play some Tetris because it's the game that's loaded in there. That being said, some of my favorite genre is probably funky JRPGs. Things like Earthbound, God Medicine, Eternal Felino was a game that I really like that's going to come up again later too. Those are the sort of games I like from early systems, and I think there's a question later on that'll get into why I like that genre in particular over American RPGs per se. The second question is, what is the worst game you have ever played? The answer is Super Boxing for the C64. It's the second from top game in the list of were C64 games on Lemon 64. I gave that list a look a little while ago, and the game above it, Darts, isn't that bad, really. The game, Superboxing, is terrible. You can't play it. The controls suck, and whatnot. He also asks, do you have any projects in the future? The answer is Blue Force and getting back into Chaos Seed. I've already kind of got a little bit going with those, but I want to kind of make sure I have enough going along so that there's no interruption as they come out. Trevmus Prime asks, what is the most disappointing game you've ever played? I think my answer to that's going to be Quest 64. We had an N64 as kids instead of a PlayStation, and so I was all amped up and super excited for some RPG styles on a system that I owned. You know, all my friends with PlayStations were getting all these kick-ass RPGs all the time, and I was like, now it's finally going to be for me. And the game really didn't live up to my expectations. It's not what I sort of expect out of an RPG, and looking back on it, maybe the game isn't that bad, but at the time, I was very, very disappointed with it. I really feel like they should have had more 2D games on the N64. I never played Paper Mario for the N64, but I've heard great things about it. It is 3D, but it's also kind of got that 2D RPG battle sort of thing going on. Second question, is there a particular LP you would like to do, but the logistics are too great? Now, you'll remember me mentioning Koei Games, like from the executive series, Top Management and Leading Company are two of them. Also the Uncharted Water sequels, they're not from the same series. But I actually got into ROM hacking just to try to translate these games. And specifically so that I could also LP them, because it'd be awesome. However, clearly that's not happened. But that did lead to me being able to use those skills to do my Super Mario RPG proposal to Jaxors. So I guess some good came of that, but I would say those are probably the games that I would like to LP, but are logistically too much of a hurdle to overcome. There's that, and I wish NetPlay worked a lot better. There are a lot of C64 games that I would love to be able to play with a friend online as an LP, but it is hard to do. Question number 3 is, as a content creator, what gives you the drive to keep making videos? The short answer is I have fun. The longer answer is that I enjoy the process of making the videos themselves, and I also enjoy video games as sort of a stress relief. So since I don't really have failed videos near as often as I used to, it's not a cause of stress for me. It's actually, if I've had a bad day at work and come home, you know, do a couple LP videos and I feel a lot better. I also really enjoy the friendships that I've gained from LPing, so the interactions with people that have resulted from my videos keep me coming back for more as well. And let's face it, as a 33-year-old, it's a great excuse to play games more often. The next few questions come from the mysterious JG. What is your favorite LP of the ones you've done? Alone, it's probably Eternal Felina. It took a while to get through, but the story and the translation quality made it quite fun to play. I really do like almost all of my Let's Play togethers, but one that stands out as being extra enjoyable for me was actually the Kunio-kun game that I played with the Clinch. It was back when we used to live about a block and a half from each other, and it was really cool to be able to get together with him in person and play video games like once a week. It was really fun for me that way. What is your favorite LP that you had nothing to do with? And this is actually really hard to say for me because I've been watching LPs for near on 5 years now, and I've got both a bad memory and I'm really bad at picking favorites, as I've mentioned before. I guess what I can say is that some of my favorites are the ones that got me started into LPing or were early inspirations for me. 1F Jeff with the Guilds 2 and the roguelikes that he often played, Grimmeth with Liberal Crime Squad, Wall Street Kid, Deja Vu, you with Maniac Mansion, Tecmo Secret of the Stars, and the various Infogram games you've played have always been some of my favorites. Bobo with Special Criminal Investigations was also another one of my favorites, but I would have to say I also really enjoyed My Name Is Not Lily. He did some amazing playthroughs of the various Fallout games, the early ones, and looking back, I think I'm always a creature of nostalgia, so it kind of is sort of, I like the earlier things that I watched are always almost my favorites, and ones that remind me of that become newer favorites. It reminds me of a favorite saying, Rupo Kupo Rupo Po. His third question is, what is it about JRPGs that draw you to them as opposed to other RPGs? And I think this is a combo of nostalgia and a case of gameplay and stories. Other RPGs tend to try to give you freedom, which is good, but it's mostly at the cost of the story. Often the character is underdeveloped and it's just a whole bunch of side quests as opposed to main quests. Even the main story quests feel like a bunch of side quests. I like fun stories, and JRPGs tend to get a little quirkier than the American counterparts. And deeper stories are good too, and it's hard to do that with the ARPGs. ARPGs that I did like, though, that I found did this well, were Fallout 1 and 2. I really love playing through those games and going through all the different side quests in that, because they actually led to interesting stories or stranger conclusions at the end. And actually, I like them a lot more than their modern equivalent. I'm playing through Fallout 4 right now, but I always have a fond place in my heart for Fallout 1 and 2. Question number 4 is, what do you think it is about the C64 that draws to you to it as opposed to newer consoles? And I think the answer to this one is very similar to the last one, and it's one of nostalgia. We got the C64 when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and we didn't get an NES till way later in the NES's cycle, so I had this huge section of my life where the C64 was the only video game system that I had at home. And I find that even games that I didn't play for it, because this sort of helped me along with my love of gaming, any game for it is normally really nostalgic, and the games were always really super easy to just pick up and play. You didn't need an instruction booklet. And the library is massive. There are a ton of games that suck, and that's sometimes the fun of kind of playing games without reading about them too much on it, because you don't need to know the instructions of a lot of the games. Unheard of games, you're going to be able to play without any sort of major issues. There's also a very active scene still for it, so there's still new stuff coming out, like new peripherals. I recently got one that lets me play games off of an SD card. I got it from World of Commerce, which is going on in the background still. We're probably repeating pictures by now. And you know what? It costs way less than most modern consoles. Question 5 is, are there any modern ongoing game series you enjoy playing? And would you have any interest in LPing them? The answer is yes. I play the Elder Scroll games, I play Fallout games, and I would have to say the majority of the modern games that I play fall into probably one of 3 categories. They're either a multiplayer or competitive game, they're a roguelike or roguelite. I enjoy those games, and a lot of them are just like quick hit games that you might, they're less expensive to buy, and you play them for, 10 hours, and then you're never going to play them again because you've done everything there is to do in the game. I've contemplated transitioning my channel to have some of these modern games as well, and some of these might work, but I've always found that I've got a retro project of some kind on the go that I'd rather work on. Question 6 is, do you see an intentional shift in your channel with the types of games you LP, i.e. Japanese with a bit of Sierra? I suppose I used to play a lot more of the translated Japanese games with just a little bit of Sierra thrown in, and now it's a lot more C64 titles, as well as Sierra games have been making a large comeback on my channel. I don't know that this is all that intentional. It's more that there's been fewer Japanese games translated that I've wanted to play or been able to play well for the channel, and the Sierra games used to sort of be something that's easy to do and slot them in between while I'm doing the other projects, but because they're easy to do, it makes it a lot easier for me when I'm having trouble coming up with what to do to just grab a Sierra game and play it really quickly, because I really enjoy them, and it's that's probably why they used to be sprinkled in, because they were so easy to just do quickly. Number 7 is, how did you first meet Jaxors? And when did you realize she was the one you were going to propose to via Mario? The short answer is that I met Jaxors in college. We were friends for, just tons of years before we actually ended up dating, and we actually lived together as roommates, strictly platonically. And it wasn't until she moved to another city altogether that we actually started dating, which made for an interesting situation, I suppose. I suppose as soon as she agreed to move in together with me, I knew she was the one, because she was willing to move in together with me. But I think that when we first bought a car together is when I knew that she would say yes for sure, and so I wasn't too nervous to do something a little crazy to ask her to marry me. I knew she was ready for commitment when she, you know, put her financial life intertwined with mine. Question number 8 is, what's a genre of LP that you don't like? And I think this is a pretty easy answer for me. It's sort of the spooky games that rely on jump scares. If they have a creepy atmosphere, that's one thing, but if it's just like, "Roar," I don't really like those. I don't like watching them. I don't like playing them. I also, I guess mixed in with this question is, I prefer games that I don't have to actively watch the screen too much. So a great example is the old Infogram games that you played. Those are great to listen to without having to watch the screen. So and they've got great story, so I sort of like those games more. They're the polar opposite of the games that I hate. Games that I have to pay really, really close attention to the screen would also be something that I wouldn't enjoy too much. The last question here is from Bean, who asks, if you were to preserve a game in a time capsule for a future where there were no games, what game would it be? And I probably would have to say Dejectile. You know, there's no way for them to know what a shitty game is, plus it would immortalize the Pillman in the Wall. But realistically, this is actually a pretty interesting question. I'm not sure that I have a good answer to it. I kind of want to say something of like one of the anthology games, but I feel like that's kind of cheating. But like, you know, an Atari anthology or a Activision anthology or something, well, probably early EA game anthology would probably be pretty good. But that's kind of cheating. So I also feel like it can't be too complicated a game either, because, you know, as games got more complicated, it happened over time, and you get sort of used to gameplay elements. So a really complicated game you can't enjoy without sinking hours and hours into it, and these people aren't going to do that because they've never seen a game before. Maybe certain researchers would, but it's not going to become popular. So I think I'm going to have to say Pac-Man, because it's a really simple game, and it really helped kickstart the whole gaming scene. And maybe it would do that again and get a whole new generation of gamers going and interested in programming it. You know, Pac-Man Fever 2 could be a thing. And that's it for the Q&A. I'd like to thank everybody that submitted questions, as well as thank everybody for watching. I mentioned in an answer that the interaction with the various fans and people of the community is what sort of keeps me inspired, and it is, so I'd like to thank you all for that over the years as well. I'm Zerfall, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you in another video.